I'm Dr. Tyson Furr, BunnyTherapy, clinical psychologist, and today I would like to talk about accidents and how beneficial they can be. If you look at a lot of the videos I have, they often involve things like risk and anxiety and trying to get your needs met in life, and accidents are no exception. Accidents, rejections, and false starts. And the dirty little secret is that most people that succeed at what they want to do take risks. They fail, and accidents happen. Good things or bad things, it's hard to say. There are a number of experiments that led to great successes, even though they were failures. X-rays are an example. Viagra came from a look at angina. That's a completely different thing. There was this guy named Alexander Fleming who in 1928 was doing an experiment, and when he looked at it the next day, there was mold all over it, and he was like, oh no, my experiment's ruined. Just the same way you open up your can of beans in the refrigerator and see mold, or your banana goes bad. You're like, oh no, what a mess. It turns out that mold was eating germs, and the germs can save your life because he invented penicillin, antibiotics. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Amadeus, one of those films that depicts psychiatric hospitals back in the day. If you live in an old city, you see these scary red brick buildings that they look like haunted mansions, and that's where they would just warehouse psychotic people, because psychotic episodes are heavily medical, and so they were just warehousing people in their scary places. Because these people honestly believe they're hearing voices, and the voices are not nice. They're very scary. They see things, and it's not nice. It's very scary. I mean, it'd be wonderful if we heard voices saying, like, good job, or anything like that. No, they don't say that. And one day they gave someone an antihistamine, and the evil voices stopped, and they thought, oh, what's up with that? And they developed antidepressants, antipsychotics, and all that stuff started with that accidental discovery. And by the 80s, the hospitals were emptied, and there's a line of treatment. Whether people adhere to that is another story. But thanks again to Neil deGrasse Tyson and his professor. His professor was studying gas clouds in space, and he found out that if he shined a constant frequency on these gas clouds, they do emit radio waves, even though they're clouds. And he could distinguish the different kinds of atoms that comprised these clouds. And then some clever technician came along and said, wait a minute, what if I make a machine and put a human in there, and then we could look at their atoms, and the nuclear magnetic resonance imaging device was made. But that wasn't the intent of the research on gas clouds in space. It just turned out to be highly beneficial. And in 1940, Perry Spencer was working with a magnetometer, and his chocolate bar dissolved, and the microwave was born. There's an idea called functional fixedness, where we look at things every day in life and we just assume what they are is what they are, the way we look at them, like a piece of chalk. Yeah, it can write on things, but a piece of chalk can be used for many different things. I'm just trying to remember what the example was that I was taught about chalk. But another one, this happened to me when I was watching a movie back in the 70s as a kid, a little kid. And it showed like these kids playing, and a ball got stuck in a tree. And this clever little girl took her hose and had one of those little attachments that concentrates the water into a strong stream, and she used that hose to get the ball out. And all of a sudden that hose became a ball getter instead of a lawn waterer. Speaking of accidents, the founders of Google got together by a chance meeting. One was, I think they were in college, and one was doing a side hustle, I think, as a tour guide. There was definitely one of them was a tour guide, and they thought they were obnoxious, but somehow they started talking and they started collaborating, and Google was born. Steve Jobs and Wozniak, I forget his first name, were introduced by a common friend because I think it was Jobs that went to the same junior high as this guy, and they were hanging out one day and they decided to go walk around the neighborhood, and then they ran into Wozniak, who was washing a car, introduced them, chance meeting, boom. All of a sudden a collaboration starts. That Elton John movie had kind of the same thing. It has a really nice moment where a guy hands the songwriter the lyrics for a song, and he's going to give it to Elton John, and boom, Paul McCartney in high school wanted to meet women. I think he wound up meeting one, and so he went to a church function, to try and find girls to talk to. He didn't find girls. He found a John Lennon in the Quarrymen, and the John Lennon guy decided to take on his talents, and McCartney joined the Quarrymen, and the Beatles were formed. Getting back to Jobs and Wozniak, one day, I think it was Wozniak picked up Jobs from the airport, and they were driving back, and Jobs was a fruitarian, and he died of cancer, but he really believed in the health effects of fruit, and he had been to an apple orchard, and he thought that the apple orchard reminded him of the values he wanted in a brand of, something colorful and simple and bright and fun and refreshing and all that. So they came up with Apple computers. And if he hadn't gone to that apple orchard, there would be no Apple. And the image of the apple, I think, has like a hole in it, because they wanted to show that it's not a cherry or something like that. That was kind of an accidental idea. And of course, I thought that apple came from the story of Isaac Newton being hit on the head and coming up with the idea of gravity, because, he decided that like the same force that pulled the apple to his head was the same one pulling the moon around the world, and so that's an accident story. I don't think it's true. Doc Brown in Back to the Future. I met Doc Brown yesterday at Comic-Con in Tokyo. That's me there with him at the DeLorean. But it's a nice image of Doc Brown in 1955 slipping off the toilet, hitting his head, and coming up with the idea of the flux capacitor, which makes time travel possible. Now, I know that that's just a story, but I think the Apple story with Newton's just a story too. At any rate, there's all sorts of examples of welcomed accidents. And, like I probably wouldn't have started my company If somebody hadn't been introduced to our Veterans Hospital in shackles, he was 2 on the hands, 2 on the legs and stuff like that. And, I'm sure he was a good soldier, but he was pretty intense guy and didn't like me very much. And after a while I decided, you know what, I've learned enough here. I'm gonna take a risk. And I took a risk and I failed. But from those failures that came from accidental assumptions and all that, I was able to learn, and I was able to try something new, and I got to learn more about myself. So please, embrace your accidents, embrace your failures, and it's always good to talk about them out loud to someone else. There's something that happens when you say something to someone else that transforms the meaning of it. So, taking a look at my list of accidents, I want to talk about this in a different video about gold and beauty and all that. But I think the story of gold is a really interesting accident itself, because it's one of the elements. And the wonderful thing about gold is it never fades. The fixedness of gold and what it means. I think gold is there's a story there of an accidental use that's just delightful. But having said that, speaking of gold, your life is gold. And so I hope you don't waste it. I hope you go to therapy. I hope you go to somewhere where you can find someone you trust and discuss your fantasies, your failures, your hopes, your values. And so please subscribe to the channel, like, and this has been